Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Venceremos event. I'm going to get the show going. I know that people are going to continue to trickle in as we go by, but just for the sake of time. So my name is Natalie Caballero. I am the Vice President of Event here at LALSA, and we would just like to thank you all so much for joining us tonight, not only to commemorate Latin American Heritage Month, but also to just join into the conversation about what it means to be Latin in Canada's legal sector. So before we get started, I would just like to respectfully acknowledge that Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans and all newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. With the land being acknowledged, I would also like to mention for any of those interested, this webinar has been accredited for one EDI professionalism hour by the Law Society of Ontario. So with that being said, I hope that you all do enjoy hearing from our distinguished panel members who have taken the time out of their busy schedules to come in and share their stories and experiences in the legal field. So I would just like to quickly introduce Veronica Marson, who is going to be our moderator for the evening. So Veronica is an Argentine-Canadian personal injury and family lawyer. She is also the past president of the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association and has been an active member of the Latin community. She has an honors degree in international development from the University of Toronto and attained her law degree from Queen's University. In addition to her experience in the law, she has also worked in various nonprofit community development projects throughout the Americas. So with that being said, I will now pass the stage over to our moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Natalie. Bienvenidos a todos, bem-vindos amigos brasileiros. Thank you so much for joining us. I really am looking forward to tonight's discussion. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So due to the format and also time constraints, we're going to ask, I guess we don't have the opportunity sort of for back sort of question and answer during the panel. So what we're going to ask you folks to do, if you can, is, and if you're familiar enough with Zoom, is just if you look at the Q&A section on your Zoom, so it should be like at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions that you would like our panelists to answer, we will have a brief Q&A session at the end of our panel discussion. And so we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. So again, Q&A, hopefully you can find it. And if you, for whatever reason, go into chat, then I will answer and we will go from there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very distinguished panel this evening. It's my very great pleasure to introduce them to you. Our first panelist, his name is Roberto Aburto. He's a partner with Gowling WLG, where he practices municipal law, administrative law, and civil litigation with a focus on development disputes, including real property disputes, construction law, land use planning law, expropriation, municipal tax assessment, and commercial litigation. He also specialized in admin law and sports law. Roberto is a proud member of the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association, where he serves as an excellent mentor. He's a member also of the Lambda Alpha International Land Economic Society, the Ontario Bar Association, the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, and the Canadian Property Tax Association. Roberto is also a co-chair of Gowling's Canadian Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council and serves as a host of the show called Diversonomics. So it's a podcast on diversity in the legal market. Recently, in October 2020, Roberto was distinguished as an Excellence Award recipient for the Pro Bono Gender Markers Initiative at the Canadian Law Awards. So thank you very much, Roberto. Next, our next panelist is Justice Joseph Bovard, who has been a judge for the Ontario Court of Justice for 30 years. He sits in Toronto, primarily in criminal court, but has also sat in family court. Justice Bovard has a keen interest in legal education and training, which he has shown through his work in Canada, Peru, Chile, Mexico, and Tanzania. In Canada, he has worked extensively with Indigenous persons and the justice system. He's a founding member of the Toronto Gladue Persons Court, as well as the Toronto Domestic Violence Court. Justice Bovard gets his Latin American heritage from his mother, Ana Julia Alvarez, who was Mayan from El Salvador. When he was a child, Justice Bovard also lived in El Salvador. He speaks English, Spanish, and French. So welcome, Justice Bovard. Next on our panel, we have Alexander Moreno Gay, who is General Counsel at the Department of Justice. He maintains a broad civil litigation practice with an emphasis on commercial and trade disputes. Mr. Gay has appeared before all levels of court in Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, as well as the Supreme Court of Canada. Mr. Gay is an adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Law, where he teaches civil litigation and commercial arbitration. He is the author of numerous texts on arbitration, which I won't name here. You can read in his bio. And he also writes regularly chapters and articles on a wide range of topics. Mr. Gay is a member of the Law Society of Alberta, the Law Society of British Columbia, and the Law Society of Ontario, in addition to the Advocate Society and the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association. As with Justice Bovard, he's fluent in English, French, and Spanish. Our fourth panelist is Ana Rico, who is originally a refugee from El Salvador. She arrived in Canada when she was 4 years old with her parents and siblings. She was the first in her family to complete post-secondary education in Canada. She graduated from York University, where she obtained a specialized honors degree in environmental studies. She then completed her law degree at the University of Ottawa in 2012 and was called to the bar in 2013. Anna first worked in her legal career for Legal Aid Ontario as a staff lawyer, practicing in family law with a focus on child protection. And then she joined the Immigration and Refugee Board as an RPD in 2017. She adjudicated claims for regarding refugee protection from 2017 to 2021. And this year she transferred to the legal department of the Refugee Board, where she now advises RPD members and the organization about matters related to immigration and refugee law. Little fact about Anna, she is an avid traveler and reader. And one of her big bucket list items is to travel through Latin America, given that she's a big fan of the Che Guevara diaries, like many of you, no doubt. Lastly, Marisa, I would like to introduce you to Marisa Victor. She is an Ontario lawyer based in Ottawa. Currently, she is at Tribunals, Ontario, where she serves in multiple positions, including managing vice chair of the Animal Care Review Board and the Fire Safety Commission, as well as vice chair of the Landlord and Tenant Board, and a member of the License Appeals Tribunal. So she's a very busy woman. Marisa articled at the National Judicial Institute, an organization tasked with providing legal education to the judiciary. She's a graduate of Osgoode Hall Law School, where she completed a joint master's in environmental studies. Before joining Tribunals Ontario, Marisa practiced civil litigation and admin law. She has extensive experience in civil litigation, public law, admin law, constitutional law, and human rights law. Notably, she acted as counsel to Commissioner John Major at the inquiry into the bombing of Air India Flight 182. In 2017, Marisa was appointed to a 2-year volunteer position with the Federal Judicial Advisory Committee, which it's a body which is charged with making recommendations for judicial appointments to the Minister of Justice. So Marisa regularly works in English and French, and she also identifies as LatinX. So welcome, Marisa, and welcome to all of our panelists. So we should just get started. So my first question for you. So Canada's Federal Latin American Heritage Month, it's fairly new. For those of you who are not aware, it came into effect only in 2018. This, we're, I guess, commemorating today its 4th anniversary. I know that the answers can vary quite a bit, given how diverse the region is. But, I guess what I was hoping is that from each of the panelists, you could tell us in your own words, what does it mean to you to be Latin American? And maybe we can start with Roberto.
Sure. So I am the son of a Mexican immigrant who came to Canada and met my mother at the University of Waterloo. So it's part of my family, part of sort of the family fabric that I've grown up with. Sort of going into law, it's also part of a community that I'm very proud to be a member of as well today. So I think, you know, it's the warm, hugging culture that's a little different than a lot of the European cultures, and certainly distinct from that side of my family for sure.
Absolutely. Yes. Justice Bovard, maybe you could answer the same question. What does it mean for you to be Latin American?
For me, it means that I've had the opportunity to share in a very rich and cultural heritage. My mother, as you already said, was from El Salvador. My father was American, so I've always had this dual kind of existence, which at times was difficult, but it's been a very rich experience. I tell everybody that my brain is Anglo because I was educated mostly in English speaking, in the English speaking world, but my heart is Latin. And it's opened up a lot of doors for me in law. I was an interpreter in law school in the Supreme Court of Ontario. I've done a lot of work in the Latin American community, volunteer work when I was in law school. I've had a chance to do international work with judges of different countries in South America and in Mexico. And it's just enriched my life. And I'm very grateful for it.
No, that's definitely interesting. I mean, I guess there's a lot of discussion nowadays about intersectionality, right? So almost by definition, a lot of times it's kind of what it is, right? You know, everyone's a little piece of everything as part of their identity, and they kind of interpret it in their own way. I guess, Marisa, how about, why don't you tell us what being Latin American means to you?
Sure. So I was born in Toronto, and my mother is Venezuelan, and my father is English. So I also have a foot in different worlds. But what I particularly, you know, I could claim different heritages, but I claim Latinx, and it's because to me it's welcoming, and it encompasses so many different types of backgrounds and different types of people. In law, what I found useful is feeling that my roots, my Latin American roots, are different. And that has allowed me to understand other people when they come before me, and try to use that empathy to understand the different walks of life that people experience. So, you know, growing up slightly different in Toronto, I go, now I understand, or I hope I understand, when I see people before me who are trying to access justice for the first time and navigate it. And I hope that my Latin American culture and background gives me a window into understanding the different walks of life before me. So I certainly strive for that in any event.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's quite different Venezuelan and English. But I guess, I mean, that's the one benefit, right? Is that I guess from an early age, you are able to get different perspectives on different issues. And as, I guess, a practitioner, you're just open to that, right? You don't want to see things in you can't see things in one way because you grow up always being influenced by so many different cultures. Absolutely. How about Alex? You're the last one here.
Yeah.
How about you tell us what it means to be Latin American?
Yeah, my father is from Peru and my mother is from Spain. And of course, I arrived here when I was 10, not speaking English or French and only speaking Spanish. And so I'm deeply anchored, I think, in Latin culture, and frankly was my only language up until age 10. I do think we do benefit and see things a little bit different. I think coming from our backgrounds, I think our conception of the family is quite different. I think that it's generally, I think, strong Catholic values, even if you're not religious, they certainly permeate, I think, your understanding of your relationship with your grandparents and your relationship with your children and your parents. I think there are commonalities that cut across. I think most of us, regardless of whether political differences, and so I've been blessed. I think, but you know, it's one of these things in life where I think you spend the first half of your life denying where you come from, and then the second half reclaiming where you come from. And I think I'm in the second stage of my life where I'm truly reclaiming what I lost or what I denied, simply because I think as some of the immigrants, you simply didn't want. I think to be identified, you want to be part of mainstream society. And now, boy, oh boy, I am so proud to be who I am, and certainly looking to reclaim it. And you may have noticed I use the name Moreno, which is my name, and something I didn't include in any of my signature lines, but now included in all my signature lines. A strong affirmation of who I am and what I am and where I come from, and that I have a unique view of things.
No, for sure. I mean, I can't. Oh, sorry. I made one mistake. No, it's very interesting that you should say that. I mean, I can just say that my background is not Catholic, so it's interesting hearing your perspective. But yeah, I mean, it's not an uncommon feeling, you know, no matter. I mean, for many people, from what I've heard, it's just, yeah, they feel kind of weird and they don't feel in place. But I guess as time goes on, it's definitely something that, or I think people are embracing more. I know that Toronto in the 1970s, when my parents arrived, was, you know, very Anglo, and it's since changed. And so it's interesting. My dad's, you know, goes from George to Jorge, right? So it's very interesting how maybe it's a generational thing as well, that things are starting to move more in that direction. And I'm really happy to see that. Sorry, Anna, I missed you. So, you know, just to go on with the conversation. So how about, I mean, your background, I mean, you grew up in El Salvador, or you were there when you at a young age, I guess similar to Alex as well, and Justice Bovard. What does it mean to you to be Latin American?
It's absolutely okay, Veronica. I totally get it. Don't worry, I've done the same mistake also. You know, my dad used to say that he didn't know he was Latin American until he came to Canada. He always thought he was from El Salvador, and that's who he is. And so it's this concept of Latin American is one that I struggled with because it encompasses so many countries and so many diversity of cultures and diversities within each of those countries. So I don't, and at the same time, there's kind of a shared understanding, or at least a shared struggle, that many of us who are immigrants or refugees or newcomers to Canada have, right? So I can't say that I don't see myself as Latin American, because I resonate with that shared struggle that many of us have. And yet, for me, it's very distinctly from my country, from El Salvador. All of my heroes are from that small little tiny country that you can cross in less than a day. And in some ways, it's quite common to what many of you have said, which is a sense of family, a sense of belonging, and a common history of food, of big family gatherings, you know, and I don't want to take up more time, so I'll leave it at that.
No, for sure. I mean, we all like the empanadas, the pupusas, the tacos. We all are familiar with that kind of stuff, and it's interesting that you make that point, just about how identities kind of change. Because I mean, I guess you know, in the United States, like the Latin American thing is a little different, right? Like a lot of people who are born and raised there, and they don't necessarily have the same kind of issues with identity perhaps that we have here. You know, it's ideas like, oh well, you have to be fresh off the boat, and not everyone's like that, you know. But a lot of us, nevertheless, even if our parents or we're not necessarily from the same country, like there's definitely that common thread that unites people, and you know, ultimately makes us stronger. It's just a point in common where I guess, you know, there's a sense of community at the end of the day. It's very interesting, all of your answers. Moving along to our next question. I mean, obviously I'm familiar with a number of your stories, but for a number of the people who don't know our panelists, you know, I mean, they're obviously looking at you guys and they're hearing about your biographies and like, wow, these people are amazing. And it's, you know, maybe difficult for them to kind of understand sometimes what you guys are about and how you got started, and what motivates you, obviously, as a professional. So I'd like to ask the panelists, if you can let us know, if it's not too personal, what inspired you to pursue a career in law, and if it was an influence, but how has your Latin Americanness affected or influenced the way that you act as a lawyer or as a judge or an adjudicator? Maybe we can start with Marisa.
Sure. So what inspired me to be a lawyer is a little unusual. I was in theater school prior to becoming a lawyer and fell in love with Shakespeare. And there was some passages we were studying about the law, and I just assumed that going to law school, not knowing any lawyers, would be like doing Shakespeare all the time. Not sure, I may have been right, I may have been wrong.
It is,
But
isn't it?
that's how I went. That's how I knew a playwright who had gone to law school, and that was my window in. But I think that's I always, to me, Latin culture, Latin women are very fierce and they're very strong. And that's inspired me. So when I saw something like, hey, could I go to law school? I didn't see the barriers. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to try. And I think in your career as a lawyer, there's so many ups and downs, and there's moments of self-doubt and are you good enough? And I always go back to, you know what, Latin ladies are fierce, and the men can use this too, but I certainly tell myself Latin ladies are fierce, and I use that strength to inspire myself to stand up and try again and again, and to not worry so much about the ups and downs, and worry more about the journey, and being pursuing a passion. And so I think that's how it's influenced me throughout my career.
Very cool. Alex, we know that you're not a fierce Latina, but maybe you can let us know what inspired you to pursue a career in law, and if you can let us know how your Latin American heritage has influenced your approach to being a lawyer.
You're asking me a question. I think that it'll go deep into my psychology, but I'm prepared to share it with you. And to be perfectly frank, I think having arrived in this country, and really, frankly, I think feeling disenfranchised, feeling that somehow I was powerless and marginalized, I think at some level, arriving in this country. I think it caused me to react to that, and I think that what caused me to want to go into law was to affirm myself, to say, you know what, I'm here, I count, and I mean business, and I think that when I interviewed for articles, I interviewed with a guy with the name of David Scott, who's passed away last year, who's a very well-known litigator, and he had his choice of litigators and articling students, and he says, and I wasn't an A+ student, I was not a bad student, and then he looked at me and he said, you're hired. And then about a few days later, I said to David, why did you hire me? He says, you know why? He says, because you've got a great big chip on your shoulder. And he says, it's just the biggest chip I've ever seen on anyone. And he says, and you're going to be fearless. You're going to be fearless because you got something to prove, buddy. And I like that. And I think that's probably what's caused me to be who I am, and really wanting to affirm myself and say, you know what, I count, I'm here, and I may not speak your language, and I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to learn how to be the best of the best. And frankly, I think it has influenced the way in which I litigate. I mean, I'm brutal. And anybody who has a file with me knows that. And I think that it's influenced the way in which I conduct myself. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm unethical. It just means I got something to prove. And every file is an opportunity for me to show you that I got something to prove, and I'm going to win. And anyways, I said to you, it's probably in need of therapy or something, but there
We'll
you
get
go.
into that, Alex. No, but that's very interesting. It's like, I guess, you're taking something that on the one hand could be perceived as a disadvantage, and you're using it to your advantage. And I guess that sometimes, again, all of you on the panel understand, but I guess that's sometimes something that other people don't understand, right? Is that especially if your family is coming from some humble beginnings, it's like you got to fight tooth and nail for everything you got, and you don't have the luxury a lot of times of just, I don't know, someone making a phone call. Like, you really have to get out there and make your own name for yourself, right? And I think a lot of people have that, and I mean, you can see it definitely in people's accomplishments as well, and you can see it how they don't slow down and how fierce they are, right? How about Anna? Maybe you can let us know what inspired you to get into law, and how has your Latin American heritage influenced you?
So I got into law for the pursuit of justice and truth. Not that I have found truth in my career all the time, but also because I felt like the law was not created for me and people like me. And growing up in Toronto as a refugee in not the greatest neighborhood, I was never confronted with warm arms, let's say, and or given the benefit of the doubt. And I really felt like the law was created by elite and powerful individuals, and it was made to benefit those elite and powerful individuals. So I figured, why not arm myself with legal principles and use that as part of my toolkit to bring a different understanding of what the law could be and to expand our understanding of justice. So when I work in the legal field, I really work to highlight our unconscious biases. And I try to expand what we understand to be as common sense or universal principles.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's interesting because that's part of maybe the Latin American legal tradition as well, right? The different type of vision of what the law is and what a lawyer is, right? Which I think a lot of people on this panel have. Roberto, maybe you can let us know what inspired you to pursue a career in law, and how has your Latin American heritage been a part of that?
So my thought of why I was interested in pursuing a career in law was, an opportunity to work with good people and on interesting matters. In speaking with some of my friends, I don't know what it says about my self actualization or sense of self, but they sort of said, well, I think you just wanted to win. I applied to 19 law schools in 2 years, and I got into one. I was keen to get in and get after it and go for it. So I think that was start of it. I mean, I'm the first lawyer in my family. So, you do see folks who have had broader networks and such as you get into law school. And, as you sort of chart your own path, you really got to hustle. On the Latin American heritage side, I would say, again, I was sort of starting on an island, I would say, from that perspective. It was probably maybe 6 years ago now or something like that, where Alex Gay said to me, hey, you should come to the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association event. And I said, well, I'm second generation, I don't speak Spanish. Like, is there a place for me there? And Alex said, oh yeah, just come. And it was really great to see, and it's really grown on me in terms of like seeing the community that I see in my family and the warmth of that, and seeing it in the Latin American community, and seeing that I have something to offer and there's a place to welcome me, but also that we've got a wonderful, distinguished panel here. We don't have the same depth participating in our community as many other groups in this province. And so I think there's more and more people sort of taking up the reins, but getting a nudge from somebody like Alex to say, okay, let's stand shoulder to shoulder. And that's how I got to meet Marisa, and that's how I'm meeting Anna and Justice Bovard right now. Like, it's Latin American impact has really grown on me, and I see it as a lot of value and something that I get strength from. And then I have a lot of opportunities, I hope, to help and foster and assist in growing.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people think of it as like, oh, Latin American, we're a Spanish speaking club or maybe a Portuguese speaking club. And it kind of goes a lot further than that. I think personally, and I definitely think from what I'm hearing everyone saying that's the kind of take on it. It's just sometimes you know, just talking to people, you don't really realize that you have a lot in common. And that's, I guess, the benefit of sometimes having these organizations or having these kind of talks, even if it's virtual, but just kind of realizing that your experience like is not unique. And there are a lot of people who, you know, who might be feeling similarly, or, you know, or who also want to feel connected. It's a really basic human experience. Justice Bovard, I guess last but not least, maybe you can let us know, I know that you're originally from the United States. Maybe you can let us know what inspired you to pursue a career in law, and how your Latin American heritage has influenced you as a judge or as a lawyer.
Thank you, Veronica. Well, I was terrible at math and the sciences, but good at words. So I thought law school would be the best thing for me. But on a more serious level, when I was in second year at York University in my undergrad, I was doing a research paper on poverty in Canada, and I had a chance to read the brief from the Osgoode Hall law students to the Royal Commission on Poverty. And I was so inspired by those law students. It just sent chills up and down my spine. And I've always been the kind of person that wanted to help people. So I thought, wow, this is an amazing opportunity to really help people. And that was my main motivation to go into law school. I'd never even thought about it before. And I really relate to what Anna said, that I always thought that really law wasn't for me. I didn't belong in that world. I belonged in, you know, a lower kind of existence. And I used to watch the students going into Osgoode Hall Law School when I was on my way to my undergraduate classes at York, and they really were in a different world in my mind. And it wasn't until, you know, later that I started realizing, no, that world's for me too. I can get in there, and that's basically what my motivation was.
Very, 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 very interesting. Yeah, it's important to see yourself in different places. And I think that, you know, there's definitely some changes that are happening, and these kind of events kind of show people that it is possible, which is really important. So I'd like to move on to the next question. So just to contextualize it for people. So in the US, the Latino population is roughly 18.5%, which translates into roughly 60 million people. So in the, I mean, you see Daddy Yankee, you see Bad Bunny and all those kind of people. But basically you have Latinos who are a population size that's, you know, almost twice the size of the amount of people that we have in Canada. In Canada, the Latin American immigration is much lower, and percentage wise, we're a smaller percentage of the population. So bearing that in mind, just for context, I was hoping, I guess, to hear from Alex and Anna, but maybe you can let us know. So do you see the Latin American community represented in your practice? And if you do, you don't have to, but if you do, does that have an impact at all in the way that you approach your job and how your workplace operates? So maybe we can start with Alex.
Yeah. Do I see? Yeah, the answer is an absolute no. And there's a reason for that. And I think the reason is really, I think, grounded in the problem that we have in this country, which is, I think if you go south of the border, and I think, Veronica, you've touched on it, they have a clear definition of what it means to be Latin and who is part of that community. And they have a unified voice, and they have very much of a cohesive approach, I think, much more so than what we have here in Canada. The problem here is that we have sort of these waves of of immigration patterns that come into this country, right? The first wave being from Spain, the second wave from Chile, the third wave, well, came from everywhere, El Salvador and Mexico. And so we've had a really hard time in finding a unified voice. We've had a hard time, I think, in also finding a definition for our community and coming together under one definition. And we get into that debate, right? I mean, people don't want to use the word Hispanic, they want to use Latinx, they want to use, and ultimately, I think what it does is we have a very fractured, I think, perception of ourselves. And I think that the institutions and public institutions have a very fractured conception of what it is, who we are. And I think that's really hurting us. It's hurting us deeply. For instance, under the federal equity guidelines, you don't get to check off that you're, Hispanic or Latinx in any way. You only get to check off the box if, for instance, you are of indigenous descent and from Latin America, which to me makes absolutely no sense. It's absolutely ludicrous because they've aligned it along racial lines. And not only that, but then you get into these debates, right? My father is of Quechua descent from Cusco, and my sister is very, very dark. So she gets to check off the box. I don't get to check off the box. And then you ask them the very question. You say, well, my sister checks it off, but I don't check it off. And of course, I don't, get recorded in any way. And the answer is, well, if you perceive yourself to be such, then you are such. And there's the answer you get, which I think is ridiculous. But so there's a problem. There's a real problem in these institutions and federal institutions and provincial institutions in the way in which they are recording us. Another example, is Statistics Canada. Does everybody here know that if from the Caribbean, you don't get recorded? They don't actually put you in the numbers. And which to me makes absolutely no sense. And the declaration under Hispanic Heritage Day, even at the federal level, they've excluded Spain and they've included Haiti. That makes no sense to me. So, it just speaks to what these institutions and the difficulty they're having in putting their finger on who we are. And until we put our finger on who we are, we come up with a unified definition of who we are and what we are. And until these institutions perceive us as such, we're not going anywhere. And so to answer your question is, does my background in any way get recorded or recognized? Or the answer is absolutely not. And we're far from it. We're far from it. There's a lot of work that needs to get done there, I think, in changing. And the funny thing is, there's one last comment, is if you actually look at the US Census of right up until about 20 years ago, they had a really difficult time in tallying or figuring out how many Latins were in the US. And what the reason was? Is they put the questionnaire to someone and they'd ask them, well, are you a part of an ethnic group or are you part of an aracial group? And 50% of Latin Americans in the US put racial and 50% put ethnic. And what do you think that does? Well, it split the numbers, and of course, they never recorded them properly. And of course, the US found ways in order to temper these answers so they could actually get to the real numbers. We're far from that. We're so far from that. I mean, you ask someone in Canada, what does it mean to be Latin American or Hispanic? And they'll say, well, racial group. And it's like, no. Anyways, that's my answer. My answer is
it's a big conversation.
It is a big conversation, but it's one that essentially it's very discouraging. It's very discouraging. So we need a lot of work, I think, in moving the institutions along before they will recognize us.
For sure. Well, I guess Anna, picking up on what Alex is saying, I mean, I guess with your area of practice, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you can let me know. But I would assume that Latin Americans are perhaps more represented in your practice. Is that your experience?
Yes, I mean, where I work at the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, I have quite a few colleagues from different parts of Latin America. And so I do see myself represented in my workplace. We also have people that appear before the board from various countries across the world, including many countries in Latin America. So yes, I do in various capacities. And
how does that, so having that representation, if you don't mind my asking, so having that representation in the workplace, in your view, how does that affect the work, I guess, of the Immigration Board, Immigration and Refugee Board, in your view?
So, I mean, when you can see yourself reflected in positions of power and influence, then you begin to believe that you can achieve the same. And so I think it's quite valuable to see colleagues that look like me, and to have mentors that look like me and have similar lived experience. And it's also good that I get to have open dialogue, which fosters inclusivity and kind of allows us to sort of celebrate our diversity in our workplace, because it's not just colleagues from Latin America, it's colleagues from all over the world, right?
For sure, for sure. No, it's a very important point. And I guess it's something that unfortunately many lawyers have to fight about, you know, with other lawyers, at least in recent years. Moving on to our fourth question. So I guess notwithstanding the differences, and I know Alex was talking about it in terms of the cohesion, shall we say, the Latin community, and I guess number wise in the US and Canada, the statistics that have been collected do show that in both countries, there is an issue of underrepresentation of Latin Americans in law. So I guess, I mean, I know that maybe we're not all policy experts, but I'd like to ask Roberto and Marisa if, you know, I guess maybe some simple suggestions, or maybe you have an anecdote, but how do you think that we can advance Latin American underrepresentation in the legal fields? Maybe we could start with Roberto.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two lenses that I sort of looked at this question through. One is sort of a macro approach, and one is a micro approach. And I mean, on the macro approach, Alex has sort of eloquently articulated some of the issues. I think some of the other things kind of go to broader equity, diversity, inclusion approaches. So, you know, from an intersectional perspective, you know, the legal communities, you know, the upper echelons is not gender parity. And so there's other issues along there. And so on the macro side, I mean, there are, you know, the unconscious bias trainings and the anti-racism trainings and so on and so forth. On the micro side, in terms of advancing Latin American underrepresentation, I think there's a lot of tangible opportunities. I think the community getting together, having events like this is fantastic. The Canadian Hispanic Bar Association's mentorship program is fantastic. It's really seeing folks who are a little further along, you know, us panelists, going forward and mentoring and sponsoring folks to go forward. So one of my mentees from the mentorship program from the CHBA is now, you know, summered with Gowling's in Toronto. Would she have been there without me? Potentially. She's amazing, right? Like absolutely very possible. Did it hurt that, you know, that we met every couple months and that, you know, she was able to drop my name in the cover letter? It didn't hurt, for sure. And there's a lot of folks that have those communities. And so we need to do more of that. We need to do more sponsorship. I'm happy to have 2 Latin American associates working in my group now. And so it's trying to find more opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship that I think is kind of a micro opportunity, and for the mentees or the students here to not be afraid to ask and reach out. And, you know, anybody who reaches out, I'm happy to do a virtual coffee, or if you're in Ottawa, maybe someday a real coffee like the before times.
Careful, people are going to start emailing you. No, but it's interesting you should say that, because in terms of mentorship, I guess, you know, when I speak to a lot of lawyers and, you know, just Canadians in general, they don't see the Latin American community as disadvantaged in any way. You know, and I obviously there's different degrees depending on how you look and whether or not you have an accent or if you can speak English. But, you know, it's amazing to me that, you know, despite all these kind of programs, people don't see that and see how, you know, it's important to give people opportunities, because it's a community of, you know, people who are really trying to get ahead. And, you know, you have people also coming from other countries who have a wealth of experience that unfortunately a lot of times isn't being utilized to its full potential. So I think you're absolutely right. Marisa, over to you. So in your view, you may not agree with Roberto, I don't know, but how do you think?
Could I disagree with her?
I don't know, but how do you think we can advance Latin American underrepresentation in the legal field?
So I think first is sort of shouting from the windows and the rooftops that we are underrepresented. And I myself learned about this at a Canadian Hispanic Bar Association meeting, and I didn't even realize myself how underrepresented we are. And so that inspired changes for myself that I've now put on every single bio that I have that I identify as Latinx, because I want people to know that that's my background. And then, and I, you know, as you know, we're further along in our career, I want people to know that they're, when they're coming before me, or they're seeing me, that they are seeing themselves reflected in the law and in adjudication. So that is something that I strongly encourage everyone to do, to start claiming your heritage and making sure that people know who you are. And then together with that is applying for things. Put your name out there. Don't be afraid to fail. We don't have enough Latinx people applying to be on boards, to be in volunteer positions, jobs aside, you know, make sure that we're out there, because just being in law school as a Latin American or person of Latin American heritage means that you are now a leader in the community. You have a privileged position, and it doesn't feel that way when you're in law school. You think, I don't know anything, I'm just a student, but you now have access to information that other people don't, and that's a fantastic opportunity. So you now have to be a leader, and every one of us has to be a leader, and we have to support our community. And I wanted to say something just anecdotally. Some of the people who helped me most in my career were not people of Latin American backgrounds. I've had mentors of all different walks, and I learned from that experience as a mentee, and I pay it back as a mentor. But also, I want to encourage people that kind of stuff, you know, it pays forward. So if you see someone, they don't have to be Latin American. If you see someone who you think is disadvantaged and you can help them out, you can suggest, hey, you know, we need you to speak for your people in this organization. We're underrepresented. We need more diversity. We need to encourage that, because that's going to help us as well. So I really, you know, we're Latin American, but we're also a member of the human race. So I really encourage inclusivity of all peoples, and to use our position to, of course, encourage and hopefully change the representation of Latin Americans in the legal field. But, you know, the legal field is in general quite white, mostly male. There's a lot of change we need to do. So, you know, I think that we all need to help for that. And I just want to point out, though, that a lot of white males have helped me in my career. So, you know, I'm not saying anything against, you know, white males, but I am saying that we need a lot more diversity in the law, and it takes courage to fight against that. And I hope that everyone is a little inspired by tonight's panel to push for more diversity, and to make sure that we continue to encourage Latin Americans and Latinx people to put their names forward.
Wow, yeah, that's if that isn't a call to action, I don't know what is, Marisa. But I guess we're a little short for time, so before we get to our Q&A, I just wanted to ask one more question. So this is sort of a bit of a segue from Marisa's comments, and also leading in from Roberto's, and it's a bit of a loaded question, but so I guess something that has attracted a lot of attention or controversy in recent years, especially in Ontario, has been, you know, we've been talking about like racial justice and, you know, issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So EDI, for those of you who are not familiar. I'd like to ask Justice Bovard, I mean, to the extent that you can comment, obviously, given your position, but maybe you can let us know, maybe in general terms, what your thoughts are about the current state of EDI in law, and where would you like to see it in future?
Thank you, Veronica. Well, I can't comment on those subjects with respect to all aspects of law. I'd be going way beyond my competence. I can talk about it with respect to the criminal law, because I'm mainly a criminal court judge, and I can talk about the experience that I've had over 30 years of being a judge, And I'm really, although I totally acknowledge that we're underrepresented, there's no doubt about that. But on a more anecdotal basis or level, I'm encouraged that things are changing. And it's conferences like this one that are helping to change it. It's all the efforts that all of our panelists have described that they're involved in that are helping to change things. And over the years, I've seen more and more Latin American lawyers appearing before me. And they're not just flashes in the pan. I see them over and over again. And that has an impact. It may be imperceptible in a sense, but it does have an impact. It impacts their general community, the people that know them. It impacts other, people they come into contact with in the legal system because they recognize them as Latin American. So I think even though there's a lot of work still to be done, I think there's a lot of room for feeling encouraged as well, that things are getting more equitable and diverse in at least in the area of criminal law. I can't speak to other areas because I don't have any experience in them, so I can't really say. But I would like to see organizations like this one and the Hispanic Bar Association continue and ramp up their efforts, because I really do think that they're having an effect. And I think it's also really important for families, mothers and fathers, to inculcate in their kids the importance of higher education and to try to expose them to people that perhaps are lawyers in the Latin American community. I don't know how they can do it. You just have to use your imagination. But it really means a lot when you see, as a young person, you see a Latin American person in that kind of a position, because that communicates to you right away you can do it. And that's really all important. You plant the seed, and the seed will grow if it's encouraged. So I would like to see more inclusion. There's no doubt about it. But I guess it's my personality to try to be happy about what I can be happy about and not try to focus too much on the negative, but at the same time, acknowledge that more work has to be done.
No, for sure. It's not, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? But at least it's encouraging that things are, the needle is moving in a positive direction, with events like tonight and other efforts. And I always say it's, just this community is just amazing, and the things that people do, that they're always willing to step up, and they're always willing to help people. So it's a positive sign. And I think, obviously we're trying to make progress in the right direction.
It is. I'd like to invite all our panelists to apply to be judges.
Come on, guys.
I'm sure you get appointed. Really, that's a big problem. As far as I know, I'm the only Latin American judge at my level of court, perhaps, and I think there's one more in out west, but that's not a lot. 2 Latin American judges. We need more great lawyers like the ones we have on our panel to apply, and you'll get appointed.
All right, everyone, we know what our tasks are. So I guess I'd like to hand it over to, our audience Q&A, if we can. So I'd like to Manuela Jimenez Bueno, if you're with us. I know we had some questions, and maybe you can take it over, Manuela.
Thank you, Veronica. Yes, we did get a couple questions. However, due to time constraints, I'm going to be asking one of the questions to the panelists, and the other question, if the panelists would like to respond to it directly, feel free. So the question is, if I could just get one volunteer for the question. The question is, if you could go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would you say? Any volunteers?
I guess.
So they can, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Alex. No,
No,
I almost waited long enough.
But I had one comment to make, and that is, there's a study that was done in the U.S. and about trying to figure out why it was that in the U.S. A large number of Latin lawyers were being drawn into the public sector. And if I had to give anyone any advice, that the results that came back were quite stunning. And I only read it after I spent 20 years in the Department of Justice and began to realize that maybe there was no free will and maybe I was a victim of circumstance. And the reason is that they found that the most newcomers into this country or into the US were drawn into public practice only because they were looking for security. They were looking for the security that they didn't have, right? And so someone offered them $80,000 salary as opposed to, $250,000 salary by going into the private sector. They'd go for the public because, that was, a way to get security. And so if I did give anyone any advice, I think the community suffers, I think, from low self-esteem. And I think aim high would be my advice to you. Don't give in and don't settle for less than what you're able to do. And don't let anyone tell you, because I think we settle for too little, too fast. And aim high and be relentless, because you'll get there. That would be my advice to you.
Thank you. I feel like as a fellow law student, we definitely need to hear that right now. So thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Natalie for the closing of the event.
Okay, hello everyone. To say the least, it was amazing being able to hear from all of the panelists and just reflecting on all of our common experiences and struggles and the community that we share, despite how much diversity we also have. And you have no idea just how much it means for us young law students, specifically Latin Americans, being able to see you succeeding in your positions, because we don't always get that representation, barely at all. And Justice Bovard, my dad, has always told me I should be a judge. So maybe one day I will take you up on your offer. But aside from that, something that's just so beautiful about the Latin American community, I find, specifically in law, is that the connection that we have is just so natural. And although most of us don't come from a background of family full of judges or lawyers, or come from immense wealth, we have already built that broader network that Roberto was talking about earlier, so that we're not standing on an island alone, rather we are on an island with other people. I think that we're always very community focused and we always help each other out, and that's something I love about our community. And I think it's something that should definitely be celebrated. So with that being said, I just want to thank all the panelists for your incredible insight tonight. It was extremely rewarding for us to even hear it. So thank you as well for the audience participation. We apologize that we weren't able to get to all the questions. We were pretty tight on time. And I would also like to extend a very special thank you on behalf of the LALSA executive team to the staff and administration at our law school, who really helped put this event together. I don't think it would be possible without them. And now the moment that we've all patiently been waiting for, specifically LALSA. We've been waiting for this moment since we even started the group. So just a bit of a backstory. So myself and the executive team, upon graduation, we're going to be joining approximately 300 to 400 Latin American lawyers who are serving a community of approximately 1.2 million persons of Hispanic and Latin American heritage in Canada. And one of our goals at LALSA, aside from spreading awareness and building community representation, it has always been to decrease the financial burden that our community faces when contemplating a post-secondary education, let alone even thinking about law school. So in fact, most of the executive members on LALSA, we are first-generation law students. Most of us are first-generation post-secondary students, and we've all been fortunate enough to qualify for a scholarship. So we can definitely appreciate how much a scholarship can help break down the barriers financially. So in an effort to help, we are formally launching the inaugural LALSA Venceremos Award in support of an incoming Lincoln Alexander Law student who self-identifies as Latin and has excelled as a leader and demonstrates financial need. So the name of the scholarship, it was extremely, extremely intentional. For those of you who don't speak Spanish or Portuguese, it means we collectively will overcome. And it's a tribute to the barriers and the underrepresentation that our community has and will continue to overcome in the future. So this award is just one way that we can work towards strengthening representation in the Latinx community in Canada's legal sector. So to make a donation in support of the Venceremos Award, we are going to be putting the award link in the chat box below. That should already be done with some instructions on how you can donate if you would like to. And before we sign off, I'm also going to be talking about a future event that's coming up. So this event, Lincoln Alexander School of Law is hosting the Legal Voices Conference on November 13th. At Legal Voices, we will exchange ideas and advance action on equity, diversity, inclusion in law and the justice system. So the event is free and open to all. And for more details, you can visit the little website link that's right there, ryerson.ca-legal voices. I butchered that reading, but it's right there on the screen for you. Okay, so with all of this being said, on behalf of LALSA, thank you so much for coming out to celebrate this special evening in commemoration of Latin American Heritage Month. So thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of the audience for coming out and for your contributions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of them. But with all of that said, we really do hope that you had an incredible evening and learned something tonight. Thank you, everyone.